What can we do to help the Green Movement? By we, I mean either Iranians or non-Iranians living in the United States. The conventional answer to this question is we can help the Green Movement by getting our President Obama to be forthright, speak directly on the issue of suppression in Iran, that every time heads are broken into Iran, he should be at the podium helping and speaking on behalf of the protesters. In addition to this, the argument is often made that the best way to help the reform movement in Iran is to have economic sanctions to put pressure on the regime. This will weaken their regime, and by weakening the regime, we will be helping the protest movement to bring either change, internal change, or regime change. These have become actually pretty much conventional wisdom since the crisis of June 2009, and I think most mainstream newspapers like New York Times, Washington Post subscribe to this notion. I would like to argue that actually this two-pronged strategy helps the regime and undermines the reform movement. I don't think it can be fine-tuned or modified to help it. I think structurally, basically, this pronged regime strategy is actually diametrically wrong. Let's take the first one about helping, speaking out, especially the president or American officials speaking out on behalf of the reform movement. It's of course sort of natural if people's heads are being smashed or people being executed to expect protests, especially high-ranking people in America, to speak out and protest. It's sort of like a knee-jerk reaction. I think most people in America would have that knee-jerk reaction, especially among liberals and people on the left. Ever since Woodrow Wilson, there has been this idea in the liberal perspective in the United States that the United States has a mission to spread humanitarianism and liberalism, and it's a sort of almost a duty in American mainstream psychic that U.S. is a good light that helps other people to have freedom. As Clemenceau, the president of France, said at that time, the good Lord had only 10 commandments, and Woodrow Wilson came along with 14 of them. And these were, of course, from even at the Woodrow Wilson's time, taken somewhat cynically abroad and were seen often as weapons in U.S. foreign policy rather than the spreading of humanitarianism elsewhere. And I think in Iran, especially because of obvious reasons, the average Iranian is very suspicious of the United States for sponsoring notions of democracy or reform in Iran. Every time any U.S. president speaks on this issue, it doesn't really resonate because people have the memory of 1953 and a long period of the oppression of the Shah supported by the United States. And I think this is a very important sort of cultural difference between the average American and the average Iranian on what U.S. is. Often I've been to conferences where they say, well, the United States was able to help the democratization process in Eastern Europe. Why can't it do the same in Iran? The fact is, in Eastern Europe, the bad guy were the Russians. So the United States had the good image because of its historical experience. In Iran, it's U.S. that has the bad image. The U.S. is the former Soviet Union of Iran, having basically been implicit in a long period of dictatorship. So these parallels that we used are actually misplaced because they really distort how Iranians look at the United States. Also in the United States, we have a tendency to think that each administration comes with a clean slate. So, you know, Tricky Dick may have been a nasty guy, but a new president like Obama comes with a clean slate, and he's going to completely change policy. People outside the United States have a more of a historical notion. They put presidents in a lineage of presidents. They don't see huge breaks in policy. And I think in many cases, foreigners are much more in tune with reality than the US perception that each administration is very different from the previous ones and can drastically change policy. So what we've seen, in fact, actually since June of 2009 is that presidents and, of course, the Secretary of State, Clinton has been almost eager to jump on this issue, this bandwagon. Almost every time there's a demonstration, they're out there in favor of supporting the demonstrators, which is somewhat obscene when you compare it to what was happening in Tunisia and Egypt, where for a long period of everyday demonstrations, mass demonstrations, and they were dragging their feet about supporting them. But in Iran, they quickly jumped on it. And this is obviously taken for what it is in Iran, that this is an issue that's being exploited by the imperial power to undermine the regime. So even if they don't like the regime, it fits into what Nader was talking about, the anti-imperialist rhetoric of the regime. It reinforces the notion that the reform movement is actually being used by the United States. And the best thing the United States actually can do is shut up and don't talk about it. Human rights is actually a very important issue, too important to have the United States government involved. Human rights issues in Iran should be really dealt with by human rights organizations and also countries that have a better record, especially countries in Europe, Scandinavia, have a much better, basically, track record on the issue of human rights. And when they actually intervene in Iranian issues, they've taken much more seriously. And Iranians who've got families in jail nowadays actually find it more advisable to go to Sweden or Denmark and get those governments to intercede rather than to come to Washington, because they know Washington is not really going to help their case if they intervene. So I would argue that the best thing for U.S. administration is actually to not get involved in the issues of helping the reform movement, of talking about it, and even trying to encourage use of cell phones or Twitter or whatever. And these things are basically used by the Ahmadinejad government to undermine the reform movement.